I'm your host, Alex Wright, and today I've got Dorota Owen, who recently had a big birthday celebration in Clooney Hill and has been an ambassador for the community for many years around the world, been involved with Kalikalos in Greece and many other things, and is trying to revitalise community life here as well in many different ways. So, welcome.
Thank you, Alex. That was a perfect summary of the last 30 years. And I'd love to tell you a few things about what I'm up to, but I want to give you a little bit of back history as well that puts it into context. So my parents are both Polish, and when they came to live in this country, obviously they had nothing, and that meant materially, socially, and they didn't have any family here either. So I always had the sense that we were on our own in our little bubble, and we had very little. The house that I grew up in initially had no furniture in it, and it just had white walls. But I remember within this a really extraordinary memory. It's my first memory. I was just a very small child, and I pulled myself up onto a stool, a PVC plastic stool. I pulled myself up onto this stool in a room with no furniture and had no curtains. And then I looked up, and what happened was the sun was just shining in through the window on me. And I felt so warm and so safe, so privileged. In fact, I would even use the word prosperous, because I know what that means now. I felt in that moment as if I was perfectly taken care of. And even though the reality was we had no money, we had nothing, I felt rich. And that has been my DNA all of my life, is this feeling of being rich, prosperous, wealthy. It's nothing to do with money and everything to do with safety and the knowledge that you have potential that you can unfold. So that's the image I want to take into this conversation, because that's the way I feel about Ecovillage Findhorn now. I feel that this community is amazingly rich, wealthy, prosperous, and the reason for it is because of the relationships among the people that live here, which are full of drama, but also full of intimacy. Every person has skills, talents, experiences, potentials, and put that together, and we've got an extraordinary capacity here, a potential to shine our light into the world. So the last 5 years have been tough on us. The first shock was Brexit. We lost a lot of members then. The second shock was COVID. Almost everyone was made redundant. The third shock was the arson fires. We lost the main buildings, the sanctuary and the community centre. And then finally, the foundation itself went into a closed down mode. So that was bad enough in the sense that you could feel a kind of a death. But for me, it was a very different experience, because I hadn't been here. I'd been working in China as an ambassador for the Ecovillage Findhorn and for the Ecovillage Network. And I came back to something that was very beautiful, because the weather was terrific. We were in lockdown, I was in forest, so I didn't experience any of the traumas. In fact, I felt quite the opposite. I really experienced the beauty of nature, of our surrounding community, and I was able to get on my bicycle and go everywhere. So when it came to the point that I could re-engage with community life here, I brought with me a tremendous sense of peace and really virtually no trauma that anyone else had experienced. I came here a little bit like a newborn baby, and I've just been elected to the board of Ecovillage Findhorn. I was nominated as a non-resident and voted in by non-residents, and that's also very exciting to me, because although we have got a resident community here, a lot of the strength of our community is what lies beyond it, within Forest, Burghead, within the 50-mile radius that includes membership of the NFA. But even more than that, we've got a global network that's attached via the networks of Findhorn Foundation, the SKIO, the RPs, Global Ecovillage Network itself, and a few others. So I see us here as a hub of an explosion of light, and that image that I had as a child of this explosion of light landing on me, that's been the kind of leitmotif of my life, that's now finally, after 66 years, because I just turned 66, that's really the leitmotif of this this third age that I'm entering into now.
Can you talk about, it seems that you're getting more involved with, you hired Clooney, you made this event happen there, you're getting more involved in the community. Can you talk about that and why that is?
Yeah, I can tell you why it is. First of all the time that I've lived here, which has been 22 years, I really wanted very, very much to be part of the Findhorn Foundation in an administrative sense, to work here and be employed here, but I never could because I was a mother to 3 children, a single mother, and I had to earn a living to pay for them, and so I had to work outside of the community, and I worked in schools primarily as a supply teacher, but before that I had been an executive director, so I had a lot of the skills that you would need to run an organisation, but I wasn't able to enter into that organisation. So now I can bring those skills into this executive leadership role. And so what I'm looking at is what's missing and how can I use what I've learned over the years and what I've connected to over the years. So I would also add I've got a very strong spiritual practice, and I listen in silence every day and I get my instructions, and so a lot of what I'm doing, I have to say, it's not initiated by me, but it is birthed through me. So my job always is to keep myself clear, to be a clear channel. So the projects that have arisen in me, a couple of months ago I started thinking about the Global Ecovillage Network curriculum was born here in Findhorn about 20 years ago when a group of educators got into at that point it was the community centre in the CC, in that beautiful room that held the Firebird stained glass, and they birthed this curriculum, and over the years I've been teaching this curriculum, and that curriculum has got 5 major strands, so I'm just going to name them: economy, ecology, artistic creativity, spiritual education, and the 5th is a kind of synthesis of all of these. And I thought to myself, the most important one is the economy. So what I've noticed with the demise of the Findhorn Foundation was that it had been like a kind of lid over everything that took place here in terms of economic activity. What the world saw through the window, our shop window to the world, was the Findhorn Foundation with its very strong branding, the blue background with the amazing shining star that I'd always identified with. But beneath that was so much diversity of activity. We have the Phoenix, the shop and the cafe, the bakehouse, Ecopia. There's 62 organisations that are associated with the the Ecopia website. And I thought, gosh, there's so much going on here. Economically, it's not seen to the world, it's been invisible. So about 3 years ago, I had the idea of making a film about that. And I have never actually made a full-length feature film before, but I just knew that I would and I could, and I was going to do it. So I started off by arranging interviews with key people. And the strange thing was, Alex, that every single one of those interviews was cancelled, either through a flood or a storm or a snowstorm. And I thought, well, that's not going to happen. And then to my relief, something did happen that did show the economic diversity, and that was the first enterprise fair that Ecopia organised, and I thought it was fantastic. But then, of course, not that many people went to the Enterprise Fair. So then there was a second one, and this time I had wanted it to be live streamed, and the people that were going to live stream it for me decided to give it to me as a gift, which was amazing, and that kind of liberated other cameramen to film the rest of the Enterprise Fair. And so we had 5 people filming and interviewing, and there were 5 zones, so we ended up with 50 hours worth of film. And I thought, well, that's no longer one film. I realised that was 5 films, so we're currently in the process of editing them into a series called Phoenix Rising. So the first film will be about the economy, and then I thought to myself, well, we could have a conference associated with each of those films. So then I started thinking about how we could do that, because obviously we don't have a community centre to feed everybody, or indeed sufficient accommodation. And then out of the blue came this possibility that we could use Clooney. And that's a whole story in itself, but I'll just say it had all the hallmarks of synchronicity and magic about it. So I thought to myself, okay, this hotel, the Clooney Hotel, has been bought and it's going to be renovated, and this will take at least 15 months to design and plan and begin an implementation that would involve closing down the hotel. I know that because I trained as an architect and I'm really interested in building practice. And so I thought, okay, well then there's a 15-month window to do these 5 conferences. We could have a film premiered at each conference, and will it work? I don't know. We need a tester. So I thought, well, I can use my own birthday as the opportunity for this. I'm 66. I'm going to get a pension. It's definitely worth celebrating. So I thought, okay, well, we'll give it a go. And when I started telling people about this, they looked incredibly confused and baffled. It seemed to come out of the blue. And I thought I'd better present it in a way that makes it accessible. So I made a one-page document that had the 5 conferences, the tester, what the thinking was behind it, and I circulated that so that people didn't think I was completely crazy, that there was a bigger plan. So yeah, we had the party last week, and it was quite a success. I mean, you were there. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that it felt, because the house had been kind of unloved, and that you managed to make it feel warm again, not just visually. Physically it's warm because it's being heated well, but also the way you decorated the rooms and everything made it feel alive again as a building. Can you talk about the new owners as well?
Yeah, I can tell you the story of how we met. So I had heard that I'd been sold to a Saudi Arabian, and I used to live in the Middle East. I lived in the Middle East for about the best part of a decade and had very good connections all over the Middle East. I worked in Muscat in Oman, and I really, really loved it and formed a very strong connection with people in the area. I actually worked as an independent consultant, but I also helped to set up a holistic centre called Elixir. And I didn't know for a very long time till later that Elixir, which is the Arabic for the water of life, was actually Eileen's spiritual name, so it was one of those amazing synchronicities. So what happened is we looked on booking.com one day and we discovered that Clooney was being rented out on booking.com. I have to say we saw that with some hilarity, because whoever took the pictures wasn't really looking for the best views, so every single bathroom was photographed with the toilet seat up. It looked really funny. So I thought, well, we'll test this out then, and and then Fabian, my really good friend, my partner in all sorts of shenanigans, he got all very excited about it. He said, Dorota, the new owners are from Arabic, and I know my hairdresser, what was actually my hairdresser, Ivan, the Ukrainian, who used to live in Bahrain, and he became our interpreter. So we met with the 2 Syrian chaps, Ahmed and Isa, in Clooney, and we got talking, and it was really nice. And they said they'd put us in touch with the management, and then the management came up from London, and so we met Khalid, who is remarkable and an absolutely wonderful man, and we also met Ahmed, who is the administrative coordinator for the company that's taking on the management just now, and we literally loved them. We just got along really, really well. And so I invited them the following day to come to the Phoenix, to the cafe, and I invited Jonathan Caddy and Christine, and I invited Suzanne Quinney, because she speaks a bit of Arabic, and Deirdre, because I thought there would be potential to do up the gardens, and she's a gardener. And I also invited Michael from Savitri and George Goldsmith, because I knew they'd put in an unsuccessful bid to buy Clooney. And Fabian, of course, was brokering the whole thing. So we had Khalid and Ahmed and Isa and me. So there's quite a number of us at the table. We had a really beautiful discussion. And Jonathan told them, they'd said how lovely it was to have the Syrian family living there, how much they loved it, and the children running around. And Jonathan said, oh yeah, I remember I was there as a child, and we did exactly the same. We played hide and seek in the rooms. So there was this really lovely warm connection. And then towards the end, we knew we were going to have to complete this conversation. So because Suzanne was leaving early, and I asked her just to say a few words before she went, and she said something in Arabic, and I said, well, let's all do that. We'll all do a little closure. It was really very lovely. Everyone had something very nice to say. But what was particularly lovely for me is towards the end, we got to Khalid, and he looked at me, put his hand on his heart, and he said, there is only one word. He said, and that is love. He said, Dorota, we will do everything to support you with this party. Don't worry about it. We've cancelled all the bookings to make it free for you, and we'll support you in every way. And that's what they did. So they know that my idea is to host events there in the future. And they were also very transparent about their current financial situation. Everybody in business knows that current times are, let's put it positively, dynamic. So there is a question mark around everything. But if the hotel is available for this 15-month period, And I am in the process of arranging a funding proposal with Gen International based with Abby in Amsterdam. We're looking to see if we can fund something that's much bigger than just these 5 conferences. What do you think of all that so
in
far?
Clooney?
No,
bigger?
Actually, no, much bigger.
Okay.
Much bigger in the sense, well, we would use Clooney for that part that I need, which is accommodation for people and feeding people. But obviously my focus for conferences, for obvious reasons.
You mean in a big conference in the park, which would have Clooney as accommodation?
Clooney as a satellite for accommodation that's really warm and welcoming. Because as you know, everyone that's come to experience Week at Clooney, if that was their first landing spot, everyone has such a lovely experience there. There's really something very special energetically about the PowerPoint at Clooney. And you don't have to be a scientist to notice that people come to Clooney and have transformational.
And I remember you saying about the current owners, the why they bought it. They didn't.
Yeah.
It was just a feeling thing, right?
They didn't know they were going to buy it. You know, they walked in and they just had a thunderbolt of love. They didn't know what hit them, and they said, "Well, we don't know what this is, but let's just buy it anyway." And then subsequently, the other people that came from that team had the same experience. And Kelly said that they would be sitting there in the lounge around the table, and he said a lovely thing. He said, "We are making memories here, and these are memories of love." Plus also the Syrian family that have come to live there. It is a beautiful story that we'd like to tell one day. John Ackerman and I would like to make a film of it, because they will never go back to Syria. There's nothing for them there. Their families are broken and separated. Their kids are not going to be like my kids were, third culture kids living in other countries. Khalid has never set foot in Syria. He went to international schools. He went to London School of Economics. He did a master's in digital marketing. You know, they're all sophisticated people. The people that are managing the hotel, the Syrian family that live there, they just feel so blessed to be there. They hadn't seen their children in 4 years. What a blessing it was to come and live together. And, you know, they've had experiences of living in forests, and they made friends with the neighbours, and they brought Syrian food to the neighbours, and the neighbours really miss them now because they're so great. Actually, I'm going to ask them to do the food one day for the cafe, because Issa's wife is a really fabulous cook, and we love, Eastern Mediterranean food is so good. So, yeah, that's the story of... Oh, yeah, and then there was a beautiful thing that happened at Clooney on our last day, which was Friday. We were all having breakfast, and suddenly there was this massive rain shower, and we all ran to the window because the sun was shining through the rain, and it looked like gold coins were falling from the sky. And that was the moment that John went out and sent his drone up and took a picture of this beautiful round rainbow that was just around Clooney, with Findhorn Bay in the distance. I mean, it's quite a classic picture. I think it will make him very famous, and now everybody wants to buy a copy of it. But in that moment, out of the rain came Issa and Ahmed on their electric bicycles with the children coming back from nursery. And so we asked them to join us at the table, and we did a blessing around the table. And in that moment, I asked, what is the name of the little girl, the little 4-year-old girl? And her name is Eileen, which honestly just brought tears to my eyes. But what was so strange, I said, well, why is she called Eileen? And they looked at me and said, well, it's an Arabic name. Of course, Eileen was Eileen Kadi was born in Alexandria in Egypt. So what a coincidence. But not only that, I said, well, what does it mean? And they said, it means rivers of rain. So it was one of those classic, dense moments of synchronicity that we have all experienced, I know, in both Clooney and in the energetic field that is Findhorn. Yeah, so I can tell you a little bit more about how my plans are developing. So Jen have asked me to come to them to partner in a proposal. So the partner they're looking at is a university in Brazil, and it's in Para, which is where they've just had the COP conference. So that's been a significant place on earth just very recently. And they're looking at Ecovillage Findhorn as the practical partner to offer apprenticeships. I'm calling it apprenticeships, so it's actually a learning experience for working with green enterprise, in health and well-being, in food production, and in restaurants, making bread, in ecology such as biomatrix and AES, and Trees for Life, and with social enterprise with Ecopia, and with the wind park. There's the full range is exemplified here, which is wonderful. So we could have apprentices just for a short period with any one of those businesses, and those apprentices could come back and report back in the first conference, which would be the economics conference, which would be a beautiful thing to do. So Jen is quite excited by this project now and are looking at finding larger or different funding streams for it. And at the same time, because of Brexit, Jen no longer had an office here in Findhorn, although the address is still, would you believe, my house, Lucky Star Lane. They love that address. They love it when the mail goes out to Lucky Star Lane in Forest. But also, because of that, we needed to have a base within the EU. So now our funding has led to a research institute being created at Clough-Jordan Ecovillage in Ireland, which is Ayr, not Northern Ireland. So that research institute is now looking at evaluating what this project could do. So this is really beginning to get bigger and bigger, because it would be a global first, really, in that sense. So what we're looking at, the funding proposal, the vision is to bring young people from all over the UK and all over the world to come to Findhorn, Ecovillage Findhorn, to do apprenticeships in all the different businesses with an eye to finding out for themselves practically how they can set up their own businesses wherever they're from. So that's the current project. So in essence, yes, that would revitalise our community, and it would regenerate our community financially. I believe it would bring a lot of revenue to Ecovillage Findhorn.
I'll let you drink a bit of that because it's going to get cold otherwise.
Oh, by the way, do you know what this is? Let's give a plug. It's a winter warmer made by Tian in the cafe. It's our new winter product that she devised, a whole range of herbal drinks for the winter that don't have milk.
I should have said we're in the Phoenix Cafe at the moment. Well, we're almost in the Phoenix Cafe. Being an ambassador, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think being an ambassador is a natural way of my being. I used to be extremely shy. I was a serious introvert. And my father
I can't believe that.
I know, it's hard to believe. I know, it really is hard to believe. When I was 21, my father died, and I was very close to him. And I looked at the way he'd lived his life, and he was partly an introvert because of his trauma that he'd experienced during the war. And I thought about it. I thought, if I do not change, I will end up like him. You know, basically, I'm going to die early. And I went through a real program of self-transformation. So I went to the library, as you could in those days, and I got out all the books. So I got Dale Carnegie's book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, and I followed that to the letter. I'd seen a TV show, a series called The Lives and Loves of a She-Devil. It was written by Faye Weldon, and it was essentially about the self-transformation of a very fat, ugly woman, partly because her husband had left her and she wanted him back. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. So I lost a lot of weight, had a lot of plastic surgery on the National Health because I was quite seriously deformed, dyed my hair and dressed well, and and then the other thing I really worked on was confidence, and I forced myself to speak in public, and I did a teaching degree. I'd been working in museums and art galleries, and I was kind of hidden in the background, and they asked me to give speeches about the collections, and I nearly choked, and I had a glass of water in front of me on the desk, but actually it wasn't water, it was vodka. It was the only way I could get through it. So, I know what it is to feel ugly, fat, shy, introverted. I had that experience for a good part of my life. I think that I did transform myself, and then I knew how it could be done. And then so later on, when I was in the Middle East, I started offering courses called Express Yourself, a course in confidence building, because I had been through that portal, and I knew that if I could change from somebody who really was quite a miserable person, I could change myself, then I knew I could help other people do that. So quite a few people went through those courses, and that was the beginning of my career as a workshop leader. Anyway, that was that. So now I've lost the thread.
Well, we'll talk about you being an ambassador.
Ambassador, yeah. So then I became very extroverted, and it was kind of obvious that I was a good ambassador. So I started giving speeches and things, and Jen kind of picked that up and said, oh, could you give a speech about Jen in London, because Kosha's had to drop out. And it went quite well, and from then on, whenever Kosha, who was president at the time, whenever she couldn't make it, it would be me. But I have to say, I wasn't I wasn't making up any of those speeches. Like I said, I am a clear channel. So now, very often, in fact, I'll come on stage and I've got no clue what I'm going to say. But as they say in A Course of Miracles, he who sent me will tell me what to say. And over the last 20 years, I've worked as a supply teacher all over the schools in this region. And I really don't know what I'm going to say when I stand in front of a class of children that I've never seen before. But I usually manage it quite well, partly because when I was at school, like being so shy and everything, I spent a lot of time studying. So I ended up being a bit of a polymath. I can teach any subject in the school. Well, now with the internet, anybody can teach any subject. That was why I got my practice. So I started doing this ambassador role, and Kasia and I talked about it and said, oh, it would be quite good to have a Gen ambassador. So self-appointed ambassador, there you go. But now we've trained lots of ambassadors as well to do that. And then I discovered, strangely enough, I didn't know this about my history, but my grandfather had been actually like a real ambassador. He had been the Polish ambassador to France, to Paris, and he used to come back home to his daughter in Warsaw in the early 30s with dolls and little dresses from Paris. So I didn't know that was actually in my heritage. So lo and behold, from being a humble supply teacher, I became a global ambassador. But I really love it because I love telling people about Findhorn. It's just so much fun to talk about what you love. It's easy to talk about what you love, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your family and how they came over, if that's all right? Or
yeah, I can. And it's not a pity memoir, not at all. I think my family feel incredibly lucky that we're among the very few to survive the takeover of Poland during World War II. And my mother's first memory actually is of watching a spectacular fireworks show with two adults each holding one hand, and she was like, whoopee, wild, fabulous fireworks, and they looked a bit miserable. And then only later on she discovered that was the bombing of the ghetto in Warsaw. So Warsaw was completely flattened. And my mother escaped as a child with her mother. Her father had disappeared during the war. They didn't know where he was. But he'd been a Polish officer. A lot of Polish officers were shot in a massacre in a place called Katyn. But somehow he was lucky he avoided that. I guess it wasn't really lucky in a way to be sent to Siberia, but that's where he went. So he ended up in a gulag in Siberia, and they didn't know where he was. And then they took the train to Krakow as refugees. But during the chaos and confusion of the war, somehow a little girl and her mother, who were holding hands, got separated. So they were both lost to each other. And my mother became a street child in Krakow, along with many other street urchins who could have sort of fended for themselves. And her mother, who was very beautiful and very elegant, but you know, she was the child of the ambassador, and they had heaps of servants. She didn't really know how to look after herself. I mean, she had someone to stretch her corsets in the morning, that kind of thing. She didn't really know how to look after herself. She had a nervous breakdown, but she did survive, and she had a succession of male partners who took care of her. And so there was my mother, you know, and on the streets of Krakow. But somehow through the Red Cross there came a message that, you know, this child had been lost, and it was like 1944 or 5. And then my mother's father had a sister, and she had been in what's now Ukraine, and they'd been displaced. They got to Krakow, and there was a message that the child was in Krakow. And just extraordinarily, they remembered that there had been a little girl handing out envelopes for sale. That's because the Gestapo had abandoned their headquarters and the offices were empty, so all the street children had gone in and riffled through the stationery, and she got a pack of envelopes. So they recognised the child, which I feel like crying. It's kind of a miracle, you know. So she was brought up by this aunt, and then after the war, the Red Cross began tracing people. So they did. Her father got out of Siberia because the history is that Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt met at Yalta, and they were allies then. And the idea was to release the Polish officers and servicemen who'd been imprisoned in Siberia. Now, release just means let's just open the doors and let them out. So they walked
from Siberia.
They walked from Siberia to a place where the Allies were meeting them. I think it was in Uzbekistan or something like that, one of the stands. And the British Army was there to meet them, and I can tell you they were in a sorry state, but they were fed and taken care of. And then that group of Allied, it was General Anders' army, I believe they called it, they ended up in Palestine. And when he was in Palestine, he did buy a rosary in case he ever saw his daughter again, that he would give that to her. So then he was sent to the UK and he became a navigator. And his daughter grew up in communist Poland, and his wife by that time was living in Valencia, and they just didn't know where they were. And then he married again, not knowing that his wife was still alive. And when my mother was 19, she heard from the Red Cross that her father had found her. And he used to send her money in a Cousins Imperial leather talcum powder container. So she would open it, the money would come out with this fragrant talcum powder. So she came to the UK when she was 19. And she met my father, who'd also been demobbed from the Polish army. And then later on, she heard that her own mother was there. So, you know, we were very, very lucky as a family, and I felt that as a child. But it means that I was born into a complete Polish cultural immersion. And although I speak with a Scottish accent, English is not my first language, and a Scottish worldview is not my worldview. I'm very much a bohemian from Krakow, who's an ambassador by nature.
So I guess you have more of a connection with the refugees who've come from Ukraine and the Syrians and who are in the community.
So I totally identify with this beautiful Syrian family. And obviously I speak a bit of Arabic and I understand the culture a bit. And I totally identify with Ukraine's here. And again, I can understand Ukrainian and they can understand a bit of Polish. So there's a lot of hugging that happens. Yeah. And the food is the same. Ukrainian food, Polish food, Russian food. Food is a really unifying feature, isn't it? Oh, the cafe. You want to hear about the cafe? Yeah. I love the cafe. I love it in the summer when we all sit outside and tan, and I love it in the winter when we cozy on up. So the idea that the cafe would close for Christmas, frankly, would be devastating, but particularly annoying because it's the first Christmas in years that I'm spending here. So I texted Lisa Mead, who's a very good friend of mine, 2 questions. 1, is the cafe closing? 2, is it available for private hire? And she said yes. So I thought, okay, well, if I do hire it, it's a bit of a financial exposure. And although I'm famously extravagant, I actually have no money whatsoever. It's all done on a millionaire mindset. And I thought, okay, well, if we do have the cafe, it's going to have to make X amount of money, but why don't we turn it into a festival? So Charlotte, the cafe manager, has been absolutely brilliant about this. A big shout out to Charlotte because she's really used her brain. I mean, she's like way above her pay grade. She looked ahead and saw all the different legal and administrative difficulties, and she worked out a really good plan. And I said yes, because also it brings a lot of people to a beautiful place over the 2-week period. You know, the beach is beautiful, the forest is beautiful, the cafe and the Universal Hall are beautiful. The idea of them being closed over a festive time makes me weep. You know, we could as well be Pompeii or Herculaneum that's had some sort of natural disaster. An empty building always makes me feel very sad. And that was one of the things that I noticed about Clooney, you know, during our sharing, during the completion at the end of that 3-day event. It was Cornelia who said that she had realised that a building on its own, the asset on its own, is not the thing that's worth championing. She said it's the relationship between the people in it and the building that make it warm and magnetic and attractive.
You talk about having a millionaire mindset. Even though you don't have the money, you have this millionaire mindset. Can you maybe give some advice to someone who thinks, oh, I'd love that to happen, but I don't have the money, it's not possible, you know?
Yeah, that's a really, really important thing that you've mentioned there. I remember someone saying to my family one day, gosh, you know, you live such an amazing life. What would you do if you won the lottery? And we were like quite excited about that. And then we all started laughing. And we realised that nothing would have been any different. We would have still had that life. We've just been really ingenious about having a champagne lifestyle on beer money. I have signed up in this lifetime to a vow of abundance. And that's the mindset that I teach.
Well, wrap up there, I think. Thank you for making the time to talk to me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.